Every civilization begins with a seed. Some seeds grow into forests, others grow into empires. But every civilization eventually reveals the idea from which it was born. For centuries, the world has looked at Africa and seen a continent left behind. Perhaps we have been looking at the wrong thing. Perhaps Africa was never underdeveloped. Perhaps it was preserved.
Many of us live under an illusion of deep separation. We often navigate our lives as isolated individuals, viewing ourselves as entirely detached from one another and the natural world. Modern science refutes this feeling of disconnectedness. Every human being alive today shares a single, direct evolutionary origin. Fossil and archaeological evidence discovered over the last few decades is substantial, testable, and real. It confirms that our shared human family tree stretches back more than 200,000 years. We can trace this history to a specific physical location, Africa's Great Rift Valley, a 3,000-mile geological fault, provided the environment where our ancestors evolved and were tested. Biological disconnectedness is a myth. Humanity began in the exact same crucible, born as members of a single interconnected family. This ancient landscape offered immense natural wealth during the Ice Age. Regions like the Nile River Valley were resource-rich gardens of Eden, providing early Africans with a plentiful food supply from river basins and fresh lakes. This environmental abundance allowed early humans to move beyond the daily struggle for survival, creating significant leisure time away from basic chores. Scholars used this time to intensively study the laws of nature. They developed forethought, planning for events under their control, and visualizing the steps necessary to achieve long-term goals. These first cognitive leaps were the result of a harmonious and observant relationship with an abundant environment. As humanity eventually spread across the globe, they carried an advanced cognitive culture that had developed slowly over millennia. Proof of this early development exists in the Blombos Cave in South Africa. Evidence there shows that humans were assessing cognitive behavior and symbolic meaning as far back as 77,000 years ago. Archaeologists recovered small ochre blocks from the cave, covered in curious, deliberate markings. These hashed etchings represent the world's first known form of artistic expression. The foundations of culture and symbolic thinking were birthed natively on the African continent, long before our ancestors reached other parts of the world. Around 4000 BC, the continent's climate shifted dramatically. The once lush green Sahara began to dry out, transforming into a vast desert. This desertification forced scattered populations to migrate. They converged along the fertile banks of the Nile Valley, where the river's regular floods created a breadbasket for the region. This convergence sparked an explosion of complex societies, as growing populations organized into the first villages and states. These early collectives produced monumental architecture. In ancient Egypt, large labor forces were conscripted from across the country to build the iconic pyramids. To the south, in modern-day Sudan, the Kingdom of Kush emerged as a powerful sister empire, building its own magnificent cities and pyramid fields. Kush's capital, Kerma, was a planned city centered on the Dafufa, the largest and earliest mud brick monumental structure in Africa. These enduring monuments represent the efforts of highly coordinated, interconnected societies sharing labor, intellect, and technology, millennia into a specific philosophical worldview. This philosophy is summarized by the term Ubuntu, which translates to, "I am because we are." Ubuntu asserts that humanity is co-created dynamically through empathy and participation in the lives of others. One exists as a human being through their interconnectedness with the community. Africa's blueprint for civilization integrated technological progress with a rigorous moral understanding that the individual cannot exist without the community. This inclusive philosophy is the antithesis of the cold, exploitative individualism historically imposed on the continent by colonial forces. Steve Biko argued that a society driven by profit, individual fame, and pleasure without interrogating the structures of inequality is essentially inhumane. Biko challenged us to bestow a human face upon our institutions, grounding our social relations in the African tradition of collective trust and shared welfare. Solving the social disjuncture of the modern era requires recognizing that personal progress is inherently tied to the dignity and survival of the collective. The powerful concept of Ubuntu eventually scales up to its ultimate and most critical conclusion: our profound interdependence with the living earth itself. Today, Africa acts as the ecological heart of the world, relying on its vast tropical forests and rangelands to combat global climate change. This visualization shows the scale of Africa's contribution. The continent holds 17.5 billion tons of irrecoverable carbon, representing more than 12% of the world's total. Modern acts of ecological Ubuntu, like the Great Green Wall Initiative, aim to restore 100 million hectares of land across the Sahara and Sahel. Protecting and nurturing these critical biodiversity zones across the continent is truly the ultimate modern act of global communal care. Africa provided the birthplace for our physical past, and its philosophy of interconnectedness offers the blueprint needed to secure our shared future. We live in an era of peak technological mastery. We can build towering skylines and engineer the world to our exact specifications. Yet, alongside this engineering success, we are witnessing a severe unraveling of our ecological systems and a pervasive sense of spiritual isolation. This crisis is the logical result of a worldview rooted in extreme individualism. When industrial materialism drives a society, the extraction of resources takes priority over the maintenance of connections. Historically, this has been described as Euro-Gentile dominion, an ideology that relies on the subjugation of the natural world and the division of human populations to maintain its structures. We constructed entire societies around this division. We enforced physical, psychological, and legal boundaries between people, treating human separation as if it were an immutable law of nature, rather than a manufactured system. By embracing this fragmented reality, modern civilization actively distanced itself from the underlying rhythms of the planet. We effectively forgot how the natural world operates. If this paradigm of isolation is failing us, where do we look for a working alternative? How do we locate the original, unbroken blueprint for humanity? To cure this modern fracture, we have to look backward. We must return to the physical cradle of our species and examine the unified foundation we walked away from. This is the Great Rift Valley. For roughly 200,000 years, this massive geological fault stretching across East Africa provided the environment in which our ancestors evolved and thrived. The archaeological record is definitive. In the late 1990s, scientists unearthed a skull in Ethiopia, known as Idaltu. Dating back 160,000 years, it possesses the exact facial and cranial structure of modern Homo sapiens, confirming that our biological foundation was laid entirely on the African continent. Researchers use coalescent theory to track the out-of-Africa migration backward through time. When we follow these genetic signatures flowing in reverse, they all point to the exact same origin. Every living person shares a direct maternal ancestor who lived in Africa. Biology and genetics verify what the fossil record suggests. The physical traits we use to divide ourselves are skin-deep adaptations. At our genetic core, we are one continuous, unbroken family. Early human life reached beyond survival into the realm of the abstract. Discoveries like the etched ochre blocks in South Africa's Blombos Cave show symbolic meaning and complex thought emerging long before the global migrations. That foundational creativity grew into complex societies. Sophisticated states like the ancient kingdom of Kush built massive cities and monumental stone pyramids along the Nile. This drive for technological and artistic advancement spread deep into Central Africa. Specialized ironworking communities emerged, producing intricate terracotta sculptures, like those of the Nok culture, leaving behind a clear record of highly structured, symbolic societies. Within the lush basins of the Rift Valley, abundant resources afforded early scholars the leisure time to closely observe their environment. They dedicated themselves to studying the laws of nature. These scholars recognized a divine interconnectedness between all living things. Instead of seeking to dominate their surroundings, they developed systems of thought designed to harmonize human action with natural rhythms. Africa provided the original template for civilization. It was a template built on deep observation and alignment with the environment, rather than its extraction. This interconnectedness is distilled into the moral philosophy of Ubuntu, which translates simply, I am a person through other persons. As leaders like Archbishop Desmond Tutu have articulated, it is a philosophy anchored in generosity and mutual care. Ubuntu directly opposes the Western emphasis on the isolated self, the idea of I think, therefore I am. It asserts a collectivist reality. Your humanity is not something you possess in isolation. It is a quality you owe to those around you. This is a rigorous political and social mandate. The anti-apartheid activist and intellectual Steve Biko challenged the world with this concept. He argued that by embracing this true humanity, we could bestow upon society its greatest possible gift, a more human face. Spiritual leaders like Ben Ammi Ben Israel echoed this through pneumatic immanence, the teaching that life, growth, and communal vitality are direct manifestations of the divine. Ubuntu serves as an active, living framework. It dictates that an authentic human being only exists as part of a larger relational and environmental web. This ancient blueprint for living is being operationalized today as a strategy for modern planetary survival. The African Union's climate change strategy explicitly recognizes this bond. Their policy acknowledges that human survival is completely dependent on the protection and restoration of the continent's key carbon sinks. We see this applied through initiatives like the Great Green Wall. This is an African-led transboundary effort aimed at reversing land degradation across thousands of miles of the Sahara and Sahel. By restoring these forests, mangroves, and grasslands, participating nations are putting Ubuntu into practice on an ecological scale. It is a stark acknowledgement that human welfare is tied directly to the health of the Earth. By integrating biodiversity conservation into climate actions, these policies offer an alternative to extractive capitalism. They prioritize restorative stewardship, our genetic history, the legacy of our earliest scholars, and the demands of modern ecological science converge on a single requirement, a unified life consciousness. We are not locked into a path of separation and collapse. By remembering our shared roots and recognizing our inherent reliance on one another and the planet, we hold the blueprint to begin again.